I thought that the Shedeur Sanders takes were flying all over the place for about 72 hours. And I'm going to go ahead and say almost everybody was right. When you go wandering off to Colin Kaepernick land, you've lost me on collusion. But just in terms of all of the things being said, I was kind of fascinated that I could watch people talk about something for 3 days, ask all of my friends, hey, have you read anything interesting on this? Have everyone say no. Like that nothing interesting has been written about this, but everybody has an opinion. And everyone is kind of right. And it's funny to see everyone kind of right. It's also funny to see everyone forget who this man's father was. Like, for the idea for this to be showy when Deion Sanders showed up to his last game, limousine, top hat, tuxedo, and 0.0 grade point average. Like, this is just the progeny being what it is after all of these years. And it's been a fun story, but have you read anything or seen anything or heard anything good?
No, not good. I think for me, like the most interesting thing was Andrew Berry's reaction as they called the pick, because this was very clearly a Jimmy Haslam move. Which
his face, you're just saying reading his face with no comment.
Reading his face, there was Stefanski forcing a clap. Like they had already taken Dylan Gabriel. That franchise is a mess. Look at their quarterback room right now. Just make a reality show around that quarterback room. You know it's not going to work out for Shedeur because the Browns took him. It's just a joke of a franchise. So
and Andrew Berry's reaction, it didn't make any. I mean, his explanation didn't make any sense to me. Where it's we took him there because we believe that he's going to outperform the value of the pick. It's like, okay, but then you're also the only way he outperforms the value of the pick is if the guy you took in the third round then underperforms the value you took.
You cracked the case, Saz.
Thank you.
It doesn't make any sense because the explanation was a lie. The explanation was Jimmy Haslam made this call.
What if he just said that? What if he just got in front of the mic with owner maybe?
But why don't you just say that? It's so obvious.
Well,
why
doesn't
doesn't
the owner
anyone
has actually said it for himself in the past? Deshaun Watson, it took him a couple of years to kind of admit that one. Johnny Manziel, there was an unhoused individual that had more influence than our.
So if Shedeur's really good, the owner's going to come out and say, I told him to do that.
Yeah, we'll find out. Or if it's like his fault. I mean, it's a low stakes thing. That's why there isn't collusion. Actually, one of the best opinions that I heard on the matter was on Denny Hamlin's podcast. Like, collusion, get out of here. It's the NFL draft. It's like low stakes. You mean to tell me, like, these front offices are killer. If they truly feel like Shedeur Sanders presents a value and that can help them win football games, they're going to collude to keep this kid out.
I mean, Stephen A. was giving voice to that. So, Jemele, come in here. They lost me. I was willing to engage on all the talk right up until we arrived at Colin Kaepernick land, and it just gets so historically forgetful as to be an ignorant, insulting argument to make to see collusion here, as opposed to, hey, I've been watching drafts for a long time, and woo, Deion was wrong, huh, about his kid? Deion was wrong thinking his kid was the second or third best player in the draft, and we kind of believed him because Deion just kept telling us. And so everybody put him up there. But, Jemele, thank you for joining us. And as you've absorbed the coverage, where have you been amused and where have you been enlightened?
Well, the neighborhood race lady has a surprising take here. I don't think this really was about race at all. And I know that, and it pains me to say this only from this perspective, is because I have been as critical of the NFL and its racist undertones and overtones as much as anybody. I am not the one to throw down the cape over the puddle for the NFL because their track record speaks for itself when it comes to matters where race is, if not directly implied, at least it's just sort of floating there right around the atmosphere and their unwillingness to actually deal with it. But in this case, what is crazy to me is that we have turned Shedeur Sanders not being taken in the first round, not being taken when people thought that he should have been, as if he's some kind of freedom fighter and political prisoner. And I'm like, that's not what any of this was about. Listen, it's hard for me. And I know that just because you have, sometimes these things don't go together at all. It's like in the territory of you have a black friend, right? But the person I really feel sorry for is Cam Ward. Cam Ward went number one. Cam Ward was a 0-star recruit from a 2-parent home, because you know how we like to throw that around, right? And on some respectability type of stuff. He is a fantastic player, confident, did all the things, drafted number one. And with the way people have so embraced this narrative that Shedeur was done so wrong, it's like they basically making Cam Ward sound like he's Steven from Django. And I'm just like, you don't even know this kid. It's like, suddenly he's painted in this light because, oh, the NFL will accept that type of black, but not this type of black. It's like, do you know how many black players went ahead of Shedeur Sanders? It's a lot of them, all right? And the bottom line is maybe we should accept the fact, and this is not to say that Shedeur Sanders cannot go on to have a great NFL career, can't do great things, but maybe we, as black people, need to accept the fact that Deion Sanders may have overplayed his hand a little bit. And there's no crime in him infusing all the confidence in Shedeur. Listen, I was not bothered by the wrist flexing, by none of that. NFL teams, if you're talented enough, they don't care, all right? They don't. And we have seen this countless times. I mean, the Baltimore Ravens in the second round drafted somebody who has been accused of sexual assault multiple times. But you want me to believe that, like, in the NFL, they make these talent decisions all the time. Boy, if the talent is worth it, they don't give a damn if you showed up in gold-plated everything, flashing whatever, as long as you can play. That's all they care about.
Jemele, I want to get your thoughts here on whether there's a greater sports crime with the customer than arrogance, but I know that Mike Ryan was bothered by what it is you were saying about the coverage on Cam Ward.
It was terrible. This was a zero-star prospect in high school that had built himself up to the #1 overall draft pick in the NFL. It is a momentous thing. It is an inspiring story, and you're spending that entire time talking about a 5th-round draft pick. It is so, in hindsight, granted, the benefit of hindsight, why would you do this? Why would you make it about Cam Ward versus Shedeur? Because Mel Kiper had his projections way wrong and you wanted to make television? You should have leaned into the moment. It is such an uplifting story. Cam Ward going from 0-star, a guy that ran the wing T in high school, to Incarnate Word, to Washington State, to a guy that declared for the draft last year but didn't really have draft prospects. He would have been a 5th-round draft pick like Shedeur had he entered, turned himself to #1 overall. That is an inspiring story that ESPN should have leaned all the way in on. Instead, we got BS because their main draft analyst felt some kind of way about it. And in retrospect, they could have been talking about any 5th-round draft pick. It was just such a missed opportunity.
Jemele, what do you make of not just that, but also the needs in media to be right, sound right, and defend your position? Because Mel Kiper Jr. went down swinging on I know what I'm talking about, and the NFL has no idea how to analyze quarterbacks because he just insisted that his identity at the end would be, I'm right about this. Everyone else is wrong. And it just ends up tainting the coverage because his voice on it, Jemele, broadcasters do this in a way that's really influential. If people are a little bit mad, they're going to get a lot angry if all of a sudden what they see is a broadcaster with any credibility lighting flames on this is so wrong, this is disgusting, this is disgraceful, when all you're doing is wrapping a cape in. You were really wrong, Mel, in a way that, like, you've rarely been this kind of wrong.
Yeah, I mean, listen, we act like this is, and I'm not trying to throw a shot at Mel Kiper because I generally find him to be a good person. Like I've dealt with him over the years. He's been nothing but kind to me. But this ain't the first time Mel has been badly wrong. All right. And the problem in this case, why it was kind of the perfect recipe for this kind of explosive reaction by a lot of people, is that Deion Sanders, Shedeur Sanders, the entire Colorado story, they brought in a lot of really casual fans, as in people who did not pay attention to football at all or barely paid attention to college football, and certainly not the NFL draft. So between Deion building the hype, between the hype in general just being around this team, there was an expectation already built that Mel Kiper fed. So a lot of people are feeling disappointed, and we're feeling like this was a grave injustice when it's just, if you watched and studied the NFL and reported on the NFL, you understand how this could have possibly happened. I mean, I would even gather to say, if anything, at least among the media, I mean, how fans have responded, and they tend to get blurred together, because there was definitely a huge portion of particular fan bases that did the opposite in terms of treating Shedeur Sanders a particular way. And when we know what that is, we know what that element is. Like, they definitely face that. But in the media, if anything, because of the reverence for Deion, I think a lot of people were kind of covering for it. And he got not him himself, but when it came to like really evaluating Shedeur's talent, I think that they probably gave him some passes and maybe didn't report as accurately or as honestly as they should have because of who his father was. And
that's crazy.
That doesn't do things a right.
That's crazy. That's crazy to suggest that the media was sort of biased and bought by Deion's charm.
That's on.
I don't know if it's his charm, because I do think what happens in the media, especially, and it can be done sort of innocently enough when you see a fan base reacting, because Shedeur Sanders, Deion Sanders, let's be real, they made a whole lot of white folks mad. They made them mad, all right, by the way they presented themselves. Like and there was nothing wrong with how they did, but there was a contingent that was on the hate train because they thought it was overhyped and all the other narratives that we have talked about when it came to this family. And I think that there were media members who were very conscious of that and understood that that was at play. And perhaps it made them pull their punches in ways because we saw too much extreme. Just like, there was media in Colorado when Deion had that back and forth with that reporter based off something that he reported on. We saw how Deion, being charismatic and being very, very somebody who understands the media, having been a part of it, we see how he is able to use the media in his favor. I mean, he is. And I think a lot of media members, rather than give another draft pick whose last name might not be Sanders, I think a lot of these stories that we heard about his approach and criticisms about his approach to the NFL, to the combine, to other things, I think those things would have probably been reported and talked about a lot sooner if it were somebody else not attached to the last name Sanders.
Right. I think that was my takeaway yesterday was if his name was Shedeur Williams, but those stories about how he behaved in pre-draft came out, I think the same thing would have happened. I don't know, in a weird way, I don't know how much Deion Sanders had anything to do with what happened to him on draft day, because it seems to me it was more about teams saying, well, this guy's clearly not a serious guy, especially playing that position.
What you guys are saying, though, I'm sorry, Jemele, what you guys are saying doesn't make sense to me. The idea that our information brokers and the people who are mining the data on scouting report would just be hypnotized and mesmerized by, well, Deion says he's a top pick, therefore he's a top pick.
It's not necessarily just charisma, though, right? It's intimidation of the local media. We saw it, right? If you're not going to sit here and compliment my kid and Travis Hunter, who I brought in here too, and me, you're not going to be here. I'm not going to allow you into my media space. I'm not going to talk to you. I'm going to dismiss your questions. It's right out of the Trump playbook. Like, it's the same idea, which is if you are not here asking me the questions I want to be asked, I'm not going to answer them. And the only information that's going to come out is positive. And there were a ton of folks, understandably, excited about the story. We're part of it, right? We just kept talking about how cool Colorado is, how good Shedeur Sanders is, how good Travis Hunter is. Never really breaking down any Colorado games. How many of us were really watching every snap? We weren't. But we were hyping it up because it was an awesome story. And now all of these things, whether it's his personality, whether it's the way he treats his teammates, whether it's the way he treats opponents, all of those things sort of come to light in these interview spaces in a different way than you could get with the media.